All right, let's get right into it. What if I told you that you could be doing the exact same job, same hours, same everything, but keep an extra $1,500 in your pocket every single month? How? It's actually pretty simple, just by changing where you live. Now, that might sound a little too good to be true, but for a ton of remote professionals, it's a very real opportunity that's just sitting there. And look, this isn't some made-up number. We're talking about $18,200. That's the average yearly net gain for a high-earning remote worker who moves from the US to Spain, all thanks to a newly updated law. It's called the Beckham Law, and it lets you get taxed at a flat 24% for your first 6 years. Yeah, that's over 18 grand of cold, hard cash in your bank account, after taxes and Social Security. So when you don't take advantage of something like this, you're basically, well, you're essentially donating a luxury car's worth of your income to a government you might not even be living under anymore. Think about that. There's a legal way to keep that money, and today, we're going to show you exactly what it looks like. So what's the real problem here? Well, it's this thing we call the invisible tax of staying put. It's all the money you're losing, not because of what you're doing, but just because of where you're doing it. See, most of us are still stuck on this old-school home country tax logic that just doesn't make sense anymore in the age of remote work. You know, there's this mindset, especially among freelancers and digital nomads, that paying crazy high taxes is just the price of doing business. It's the cost of earning a good income. So they stay put in these high tax places because, frankly, they're terrified of the paperwork, or they just assume these special tax deals, like the one we're talking about, aren't meant for them. But what they're missing is a huge financial opportunity.
Of course, knowing the opportunity is there is one thing, but actually doing something about it, that's a whole different story. And this is where the paralysis of complexity kicks in. Those very real, practical barriers that keep even the smartest people totally stuck.
And the biggest barrier of all? It's got a name. Analysis paralysis. You know that feeling, right? You're so overwhelmed by all the information, all the what-ifs, that you just do nothing. You end up choosing to pay what's basically a complexity tax just to avoid the headache. And look, the friction is real. I get it. You could spend weeks trying to figure out these insane international tax codes. Or you could drop $5,000 on a consultant, only to get back some messy spreadsheet that doesn't even tell you if the lower taxes get completely wiped out by, say, higher rent. It's exhausting just thinking about it. And all the while you're just thinking about it, you're losing around $1,500 every single month. Do you know what that is? That's your rent for a gorgeous apartment in Lisbon. That's a first-class ticket to Bali. Gone. The cost of just sitting on your hands is absolutely staggering. Let's be honest with ourselves for a second. For a lot of people, the current tax strategy is basically just crossing your fingers and hoping one of those terrifying manila envelopes from the IRS doesn't show up in your mailbox.
Yeah.
We can definitely do better than that. Okay, so this is where we turn the corner. We're going to move away from all the fear, the gut feelings, the guesswork, and we're going to move toward clear logic and hard numbers. It's time to get a real calculated answer. And the path to that clarity, it's actually a super simple 3-step simulation. First, you just compare your tax delta, see the raw numbers. Second, you verify if you're even eligible for the visa. And third, you calculate your global return on investment, which means you factor in the cost of living. That's it. No more guessing. Now check this out. Just look at the difference here. We're looking at a $100,000 freelance income. That first bar, in a high-tax U.S. state, you might take home around $60,000 after all this said and done. But that second bar, in Spain, with the Beckham Law's flat 24% rate, that number jumps to over $78,000. I mean, that is a massive, massive difference. It's right there in front of you.
Okay, so seeing that gap is pretty powerful, but it immediately leads to the next big question, right? Is this even a real option for you? Do you actually qualify?
Well, the good news is you don't have to guess anymore. There are tools out there now that can tell you if you're eligible for Spain's digital nomad visa, which is your key to this whole thing. You just pop in some basic info, like your income, and bam, you get a clear answer in like 10 seconds. It takes all the uncertainty right out of the equation. So let's say the taxes are way lower, and yep, you qualify for the visa. Awesome. That brings us to the final and maybe most important piece of the puzzle, the ultimate proof. Calculating your effective wealth. Because, look, lower taxes are great, but if your rent doubles, you haven't really gotten ahead, have you? So you really need to understand this term. Effective wealth isn't just what's left after taxes.
It's your disposable income after you account for both taxes and the local cost of living. It's the number that tells you how wealthy you actually feel living in a city.
And this right here, this is the final answer. When you compare a major hub like New York City to Madrid, it all clicks into place. Yeah, your disposable income is higher in Madrid, but your power score, which is just a way of combining that extra cash with things like safety and good internet, is a full 40% higher. At that point, the decision stops being emotional. It's just logical. Which brings us to one last very logical question that really puts this whole thing into perspective. Seriously, think about this for a second. If someone walked up to you and handed you a check for $18,000, no strings attached, would you turn around and just give it back to a government in a country you don't even live in anymore? Or would you take that money and invest it in your business, your life, your freedom? The choice is pretty clear, isn't it?